All right, we back in here. A lot of activity going on in this transfer deadline day, even weekend. That is just seems like a lot. I'm not sure. More than previous years. Maybe that's anecdotal and something that because I'm paying more attention to it, I've noticed. But I don't know. It seems like a lot. So we're gonna go through some of the winners and losers that of the Premier League transfer window, 25-26 that I thought were notable, and make a couple general points at the end of it. So to start with, we're going to go through the winners first. I guess start off on a positive note. Just to specify, this is just for this weekend and deadline day only, not necessarily the whole transfer window, just because it's been a long transfer window, and I don't think that would fit with the title of this video. So to start with, my number one, it's going to be Fulham. You know, I've spoken before, and it's clear and obvious to everybody that they haven't done much business at all in the transfer window. I mean, when I was doing my match preview for the Chelsea-Fulham game this past weekend, and even my season preview, you notice that Fulham just haven't done anything. Not a lot of turnover in the squad. Some complaints from the manager as well, Marco Silva. And, you know, looking into their squad, there's just not much change. There's not really much new to analyze about them. But in the past couple days, they brought in Chukwueze on loan, I believe, from Milan. And then they've secured a deal for Kevin from Shakhtar. I don't know much about him, but he's a wide player who should help them progress, hopefully, and consolidate their position. Maybe push a couple spots higher up in the table. We saw that they had a deal lined up for Tyreek George as well to bring him in. Well, I'll talk about him in a second when I get to losers, but the Harry Wilson deal falls through. His deal to Leeds, unfortunately, is in process. So as a result, they only bring in those two players. But considering where they were at going into the weekend, I think they're one of the most notable winners because they hadn't done much of anything. And when you stagnate in the Premier League, typically you're just on a downward spiral. So it's good to see them finally spring into action, and hopefully, I guess for them, maybe they make some deals in January as well, because as much as I think this weekend was a win for them, it's probably not enough if they want to continue to push forward into the edge of those European places. We'll move to number two. Same situation for Villa and Aston Villa as was for Fulham. They brought in Jadon Sancho from Manchester United on loan. He's probably going to see out the last year of his contract. I saw Manchester United added an option to extend a year. They should just let the contract run out and have a clean cut from Jadon Sancho at this point. But Harvey Elliott in as well from Liverpool, and I think it'll help them, bringing in some new attackers as well. I'll get into the state of their squad towards the end, but it's good to see that they've reinforced as well. They also brought in Victor Lindelof. He was a free agent after not being renewed by Manchester United. More depth at center back, so that is another winner for me. Moving on to number three. I guess I should have probably led with this one, but that's okay. We're gonna go with Alexander Isak and Yoanne Wissa. They both kind of followed the same game plan throughout the summer. You know, detaching all ties to their then current Premier League teams on social media, and refusing to come in to train at first, and eventually reporting to training after a long battle, putting out statements through reporters or themselves or otherwise, saying how they had a promise to leave, and just stirring up a bunch of shenanigans is how I'll put it. But eventually they both get their move. Isak, 130 million, I think, 120 plus 10 in add-ons to Liverpool, and then Wissa 55 million to Newcastle. I think that was a slight overpay considering his age, but they needed to get the deal done after letting go of Isak. So I guess those are the two winners that I have as well. Number four, we're gonna go with Crystal Palace. They end up keeping Marc Guehi after it looked like the transfer was going to go through, and then it falls apart after they failed to secure Igor Julio from Brighton on loan. He chooses West Ham, I guess, for game time because there can be no other reason. I mean, Crystal Palace are in a much better place playing European football. I guess he just didn't see himself as getting as much playing time with West Ham, with Palace, sorry, as opposed to West Ham, which is weird considering the deal was contingent on Marc Guehi leaving, and they have more games in their season. I don't know. I thought it was an awkward decision from Igor, but in any case, as a result of keeping Marc Guehi, it looks like they also kept their manager Oliver Glasner. I'm not sure if he had threatened to leave immediately or after the season, but they had Oliver Glasner had talks with Marc Guehi, convincing him to stay and giving him his reasons why he wanted him to stay. And ultimately, I think it's probably best at this point, considering the price for Marc Guehi, what he would have gone for to Liverpool. I think it's probably better for them to keep him, try to win the Conference League, get into the Europa League, and then go from there. Because I think the reported fee was somewhere in the region of 35 million plus maybe 5 million in add-ons to Liverpool, considering the fact that Chelsea have a sell-on clause. I'm not sure that that's even worth it. It would come out to be like 28 plus 4 in terms of the ultimate fee for Marc Guehi, and I'm just not sure. If they would have sold him, they should have done it last season. But in hindsight, they won a trophy, got European football, so it was worth it. And I think it's going to be worth it again for them to keep him, ultimately, because he's their captain, their leader. After losing Eberechi Eze to Arsenal, and then the year before, Michael Olise to Bayern. And then it looks like in a year, if they don't make Europa League, they're probably almost certain to lose Adam Wharton as well. It just seems like this is a year where they needed to stabilize themselves and hopefully win the Conference League after not being able to compete in the Europa League. And so I think it was just the best decision for Palace at the end of the day to keep Marc Guehi. And as a result, we're going to move on to the losers. And this is a bit of a zag, but it's a good transition from the Marc Guehi. My zag and my biggest loser is going to be Liverpool. Now, I know that they secured Alexander Isak from Newcastle, and it makes their attack extremely scary. I mean, if they can move Ekitike to the left, they already have Gakpo there. Ekitike can play in the center. They have Mohamed Salah. They have Federico Chiesa to come in and deputize as well. Like, they look incredibly scary. However, their biggest hole, in my opinion, that they needed addressing is that center back position and their defense. I know they had to address their fullbacks considering Andrew Robertson has had a bit of a fall off and Tsimikas hasn't proven to be at the level required. And then on the right, Trent obviously leaving on a free, bringing in Frimpong, who is hurt. But yeah, I think Marc Guehi coming in as center back and then taking over for Konate, who for one cannot stay healthy, and for two looks like he wants to make a move to Madrid on a free. And as a result, that makes that more of a need than Alexander Isak was. I know Isak is more a more impactful player for Liverpool, for any team in the world really, for the most part. But it seems like they're going to come out of this transfer break with a little bit of a hole. Konate is probably eventually going to get hurt, and they're going to have to rely on Joe Gomez to cover that position, who himself can't really stay healthy and hasn't really been at the required level needed for where Liverpool are and their status in the Premier League. And then after that, I mean, who else do they really have? If something, I mean, Van Dijk is getting up there in age. If he slows down or gets hurt in any way, they don't really necessarily have adequate cover. Joe Gomez also covers both fullbacks positions when needed. He was potentially on the move to Turkey. So I think that's probably the biggest loser. I know it's really a bit of a zag, but I think it's where I would have them just for this weekend, just for this transfer deadline day. I still think they're in contention for the league, obviously, and they could ultimately end up winning it. But in terms of their transfer business, that's where I have them. My second loser is actually going to be the Chelsea bomb squad. What's left of it, anyway. Raheem Sterling didn't get a move away. It looks like he wanted to stay in London, probably because he has a young family and is comfortable in the city. It's where he wants to be, and just Fulham weren't interested enough to get him. I'm not sure about Palace or any of those other teams in London, West Ham, or whoever it may be. Spurs were probably never going to be an answer for him. They probably were never interested. Arsenal, after that loan to them last season, they weren't gonna come back in for him as well. So he's just gonna train and collect checks, and then maybe move to a London-based team that may need him, or even maybe he can decide to move somewhere else in England that's maybe not too far geographically. I'm probably not the best to speak on that, but yeah, 2 years left on his contract, and it's looking like he's going to ride it out, I guess. The two that I feel more disappointed for than Raheem Sterling, I would say, just because that's more motivated by him wanting to stay in the same location, although I don't blame him. But David Datro Fofana and Axel Disasi. We'll start with Datro Fofana. I mean, had some interest away, but it's just going to play in the U21s. He's not an older player by any means. I'm not sure much of you know much about him. I admittedly don't know much about him either, but kind of sad for him. It looked like he was playing well in Turkey last season, but came across some injury issues. So we'll see. Hopefully he can rehab his health and find a move in January. Axel Disasi, on the other hand, he had some Premier League offers. I guess they were too low in the table for him, or didn't want to match what he wanted salary-wise for him to decide to make the switch. I thought he was okay at Aston Villa, but I guess not. And then not a part of the bomb squad, but still, I think was hard done by a little bit. Tyreek George. His move was contingent on Harry Wilson moving to Leeds and him going to Fulham. And I think it would have been a great opportunity as a 19-year-old that he wasn't going to get at Chelsea. Him getting the opportunity to establish himself as a Premier League player for a Fulham side who was in need of some new blood in the squad, obviously, as I mentioned previously. So sucks for him. But, with Delap long-term injury, Pedro Neto maybe deputizing as striker a bit more, maybe he gets a chance and proves that he's at the level for Chelsea. I mean, they're going to play a lot of games, so he's going to be involved in a lot of the squads, and hopefully he can revisit or move away in January, or the best case scenario for Chelsea is to establish himself as Chelsea quality. A little hard to do with the squad that Chelsea have, but you never know. We're going to also move on to my next loser, and that's going to be Marc Guehi, who I mentioned previously did not get his move to Liverpool. He went about this transfer window the complete opposite way that Isak and Wissa did. He stayed professional, played in the Community Shield, played in the first few matches for Palace, as well as their Conference League match, if I'm not mistaken, as well. Kept showing up for the club. 1 year left on his deal. He had the leverage to make it a bit of a dust-up, I guess, in terms of pushing for a move, and just decided not to do so. And as a result, I'm sure he really wanted to move to Liverpool, but, maybe it'll be for the best if he can help Palace make a deep run in the Conference League, potentially winning it, and it'll be worth it. Then he can get his move then. But, yeah, he went about it the way you would want somebody in his position to go about it, and didn't get the move that he desired, as opposed to Isak and Yoanne Wissa, who went about it a bit different and ultimately got the way they wanted to go. And then we're going to move to my last loser, my biggest loser, actually, of this transfer window. And it's another player. It's James Trafford of Manchester City. Coming from Burnley after being in City's academy. I think the fee was like 25 million or somewhere in that range. He has a shaky couple of games. All of a sudden, Donnarumma comes in and displaces him. And I don't even know where he goes from here. I mean, I guess he could go on loan to one of the leagues that the window closes in a couple weeks, like Turkey. I mean, Fenerbahce already covered their goalkeeper hole with another City player in Ederson, but where does he go from here? It's not like it's an older keeper, and then he can eventually transition and become that person's successor. I think there's like a 3 or 4 year difference between James Trafford and Gigi Donnarumma. 22 versus like 25 or 26. To make a comparison, earlier in the summer when Chelsea were looking at bringing in Mike Maignan from AC Milan, the thinking behind that made more sense because one, Rob Sanchez hadn't really established himself as the level required, although he's been decent as of late. But two, they have Mike Penders on loan at Strasbourg now, the Belgian keeper, the giant of a keeper. And he was really young, but the difference being is that Mike Maignan is 29 or 30 at this point, I'm not sure. And so in 3 or 4 years when Mike Penders is ready, he can succeed if he gets to that level. James Trafford, I don't even like this move. I'm sure he had an eye on breaking into the England squad as well for the World Cup next season, and it's gonna be impossible at this point. I mean, it's probably going to be Pickford. You're going to look at one of Aaron Ramsdale or Nick Pope, whoever ultimately remains the number one at Newcastle, and then Dean Henderson at Crystal Palace. And James Trafford is just not going to get the game time with Gigi Donnarumma there. He may get like the domestic cups, here and there, but it kind of sucks for him that after a couple games, Pep has seemingly just said, "Hey, you're not where we need to be, and we're going to find a replacement." So it is what it is. Those were some of my winners and losers from this transfer deadline weekend and deadline day. My second general point that I said I was going to get into, well, actually my first one being that it seems like a lot of this business has been left late. And I think the reason for that is because, if I haven't mentioned it already, the gap in the spending and the money available between the Premier League and other teams across Europe, other leagues as well, just isn't nearly at the same level. I think the Premier League in the summer transfer window has spent close to double, if not more, than the next highest, which I think was the Serie A, which is a surprise to me considering the reputation that the Serie A has had in the past couple years in terms of their financial situations. But yeah, the salaries are a lot higher. The transfer spending is a lot higher. And as a result, due to PSR, their incomings need to be a lot higher as well, which means they're going to be dealing with each other, the Premier League, for the most part, considering that a lot of these other clubs just don't have the required finances to keep up. My second general point is that the conclusion that I came to at the end of the transfer window is that a lot of the big six, and I'm going to include on top of that Aston Villa, Newcastle, and Forest, because they're the ones who crashed into those European places in this past season. They all have clear holes in their squads that could derail their respective ambitions. I mean, I'll go through them one by one quickly. Liverpool, as I mentioned previously, they still have depth issues in defense and in midfield. They lost out on Guehi, so as a result had to keep Joe Gomez, who has injury troubles, on top of Konate having injury troubles. And then at right back, Frimpong, I think he hurt his hamstring in not in the first or second game of their season, if I recall correctly. And Connor Bradley, who is their other right back, is also just coming back to fitness. He may have gotten hurt last year, I don't remember, but they've had to play Sozoblai against Arsenal at right back, which admittedly he's looked really good. Or at least versus Arsenal, he looked really good. His work rate and his ability to help and build up. I mean, who knows? Maybe that could be a more permanent switch, I guess. But they've played Endo there as well when needed. So their defenses looked a little shaky. Their midfield depth as well. And now they've lost out on Harvey Elliott. Not lost out. They have allowed him to move on to Aston Villa so that he can get more game time. So I think they're a little top heavy in terms of their attack. It's super scary, the best in the league, clearly. But, in defense, we'll see about Kirkez if he can. He looked better against Arsenal, but wasn't very good in the first 2 games. As well as the Community Shield, I don't remember if he played in that game, but he might have been a little shaky if I recall correctly as well. So, yeah, we'll see about them. And then second place from last season, Arsenal. Ideally, they would have addressed their biggest need, in my opinion, which is left wing, because I don't think Madueke is a natural left winger. That was proved against Liverpool. I'll get into that in a different video, but I do think they have the best defense in the league. I know Saliba just got hurt, but they secured Hincapié from Leverkusen. I actually think they have a better chance to win the title this year than last season. Their weakness, though, is I don't know if they have the same level of quality in terms of match winners in attack as Liverpool. Like, if they can keep up offensively, or are they going to stagnate like they've shown in the first few weeks, relying mostly on set pieces, which should be a complementary thing, but it turns out that that's their most effective form of attack. So we'll see how quickly they can gel. If Saka can get back in a couple weeks, being hurt early in the season hopefully means that with these international breaks and midweek cup games, hopefully he can regain his fitness and come back and be their first choice attacker, obviously. And if Eze and Odegaard can coincide in the same first 11, I think they may have enough to carry them over the line, as sad as it is for me to say. But they have the best defense in the league, clearly. And we'll see. I still think they're probably right below Liverpool in terms of the race for the league. I predicted Manchester City, which we're going to get to next, isn't looking good through 3 matches. But yeah, Arsenal, they have enough quality. We'll just see if the manager can get the best out of them in order to bring them over the line. In terms of Manchester City, as I said, their defense and midfield balance just has not looked good through 3 matches. I know Rodri is back, and he played a full 90 against Brighton, but he's only one guy, and he's only one man. And the way they've looked has not been very good. It's more of the same as last season. And now Ryan Cherky is hurt. He's out for a couple months. I think tore like his quad or his hamstring or something like that. And that's not looking good, considering he's the most creative player, I would say, in attack in terms of just being able to do the unexpected. Technically, he's extremely talented. They let Akanji go, which I think just signals that Kusanov is going to take more of a role in the back for them. But yeah, I think my biggest concern with Manchester City is just the level of high-end talent compared to the last few seasons when they dominated the league and won, I think, 4 straight leagues and a treble in that time. I don't think they had that same level of high-end talent. I mean, they have Haaland. Phil Foden has fallen off a cliff, I guess. He's not even... He's hurt right now, but even still, last season, he wasn't good at all. Doku is a good player, I guess. Savinho, same thing. Although he hasn't been involved in any of the matchday squads to this point because of an impending move to Tottenham that ultimately did not go through. But yeah, it just seems like they've lost a lot of high-end talent and haven't really replaced them to the same level. Now, that's not to say that they won't eventually get to that level, the players they've acquired. I just am not sure they're at that point in this season, or will get there quick enough in this season for them to ultimately challenge, which is going to mean that my prediction of Manchester City winning the league is completely incorrect, but it is what it is. Moving forward, the 4th place from last season, this club I support, Chelsea. Obviously, over the weekend, Liam Delap gets hurt. We had that whole Nico Jackson drama where he ultimately goes to Bayern Munich. Delap is out for a couple months. It sucks to see, which means João Pedro, who is probably more of a 10 anyway, has to be the 9, which he can do and has proven to be very adequate in doing so, but it doesn't get him involved in the game, which is unfortunate for him. The club has had to recall Marc Guehi back on loan, and I think he'll get a chance to really play and show that he belongs which is weird considering the fact that they sent him to a promoted side in the Premier League in Sunderland to get game time, and he hadn't really gotten it through the first couple weeks of the season. Now, admittedly, that just could be because he's on loan, so he's not the priority there. But either way, step up in competition coming back with Champions League football, so he'll get the opportunity to play at least for a couple months. Same thing with Tyreek George. Deal fell through to Fulham. He's going to get an opportunity, probably maybe a little bit at striker, but I would think more likely on the left or the right wings, with Pedro Neto deputizing there more as striker, just because of his ability to run in behind in a more established way than Tyreek George. So we'll see. The other thing is that center half is still an issue. Tosin, Chalobah being the two reliable options right now in terms of availability and consistency. Josh Achampong, not yet proven, could get there. We'll see. And Silminho on loan to Dortmund, who had a good debut by all accounts. And Benoit Badiashile, who last time he showed consistent form was when he first joined the club under Graham Potter in the 2023 season. And then since then, he's either not had a consistent run of good performances or health. And so we'll see if he can regain that. I'm not so confident in the health part. I still think he's a good player. He just needs to be match fit in order to show it, in my opinion. And I'm just not sure that that'll be the case. We're going to move next to Spurs, actually. I know they didn't finish fifth last season, but that's just what I have on the list. I still think they have left wing injury concerns as well. Some depth. Left wing right now, they have Brennan Johnson as their first choice, which I said this in a video a couple videos ago. That guy just seems like he does nothing until he pops up with a goal. So if they're gonna play with wingers more often, I know they've had a couple matches where they've played a two up top with Kudus and Richarlison, but I think Thomas Frank is very flexible and would want to play with wingers when it makes sense, depending on the matchup. Brennan Johnson is just, I don't think is probably at the required level, if I'm being honest, in that position. And, Odebear and Mateus Tell could get there eventually, but they're not there yet, clearly, because they can't jump ahead of Brennan Johnson in this situation. And then the second concern for me is just center back. I mean, they have two great center backs, very good center backs, and Van de Ven and Romero. Romero and Van de Ven both have injury issues, as proven in the past couple seasons, although very good. They have Danso behind them, who's looked good when he's played with them in a 3, and when he's deputized when they've gone 4 at the back so far this season. But that's really it. I mean, they have Dragusin, who's hurt long term. Who knows when he'll be back? And then they have Davies, who at this point can only really play a center back in a 3. I don't know how he's going to... I guess he'll have to play in a 4 if required, but that's really it. And then, they have this guy, Kota Takai. I'm reading his name here. As a new acquisition. I haven't seen him yet, so who knows with him if he's even at the level or if he's one for the future. I'm not sure. And then, at fullback, it's Pedro Porro, it's Jed Spence, and it's Udogi, who had injury troubles last season, is just getting back to full fitness. And those are the 3 options at fullback. Davies doesn't have the legs for it anymore. And then other than that, it'd be, I guess, Archie Gray could play there. Maybe Danso or somebody could play at right back, or Van de Ven could deputize as a left back if required, really required. But that puts a lot of stress on his legs. And he's not the most, fit player in terms of his health. So, they have some issues. They don't have much high-end talent, I think, to really push for a top 4 place, but they could very well finish in the top 5 if they can get some injury luck. I mean, and the last thing is, and arguably on the level of concern that they have, is if Xavi Simons gets hurt, they're back to 0 creative midfielders in terms of pushing forward. Madison out long term, Kulusevski out long term. They have just Xavi Simons, Kulusevski, who would ideally be played on the right wing behind Kudus at times as well. So, and then Solanke, injury troubles. He was a picture of health at Bournemouth, and he gets to Spurs, and now he can't stay healthy. So, they brought in Kolomuani out on loan, who can play striker. He can play left wing, I think, as well. So maybe that's a solution for them on the left. As I mentioned earlier, I'm not sure. But yeah, they have a lot of injury and depth concerns, in my opinion. And for their ambition, which I think is to push for that 5th Champions League place if the Premier League gets it, and then most likely Europa League place, I think they would be okay with. Considering they're in the Champions League this season, they just need to get their health situation in order for the most part. We'll see how that goes for them. Manchester United, I've spoken at length about their midfield. Just does not match the system. They can't play a 2-man midfield with the combination of players that they have in that position. They only really have one natural wing back in Dorgu. I mean, Malacia, I don't think got a move, so technically he's there as well. I'm not sure he'll get much of a... Well, he would have maybe got an opportunity in the League Cup, but they were eliminated by Grimsby Town. In any case, Ahmad, I guess his best position for Ruben Amorim is right wing back. And then, yeah, Dalot, he's a fullback and a 4. He's not a wing back. He's played left wing back as well. He looks even worse on that side because he can't really get down the line and then cross with his left foot the same way as he can on the right-hand side. And even on the right, he doesn't look very convincing in my opinion. So, midfield and wing back, 3-4-3, and your 4 doesn't really fit the squad. Kind of doesn't make sense to me. And then, Cunha and Mount got hurt. We'll see the extent of their injuries. Mount can't seem to stay healthy ever since he got to United. He looks like he's cooked health-wise. Although he's looked good the first few games, but it doesn't matter if you're not available to help your team. And Cunha, I mean, I think it's just an injury where he'll get back. I think they have enough required depth up top to cover that position if the manager plays it the right way. I think Xerxes can deputize as a 10. Bruno Fernandes, as I've said multiple times, is better as a 10 in my opinion as well. He can play there. So I think they have enough. Sesko will probably finally get a start since he's been acquired. He hasn't started a game yet, which is mad to me. But, well, I think he started against Grimsby, but not in the league so far through 3 matches. We'll see. I think they have enough to cover up front, in my opinion. With their goalkeeper, it looks like they solved that situation with Lemons from Antwerp. I think his name is Lemons. L-E-M-M. What is it? L-E-M-M-E-N-S. Hopefully they've solved their situation at keeper. If he turns out to be a dud, I mean, they'll have 3 dud keepers to choose from. So 3 terrible players does not solve one issue. So hopefully Lemons turns out to be a decent enough player because they really need that security. They can't, I mean, a lot of I would say half the goals they've conceded to start the season has all been down to the keeper. I mean, that Grimsby Town, the reason they lost was that near post finish on Onana's near post. That was, he should have saved it. And then that cross off the short corner against Grimsby as well. He just completely misses the ball. And even though the goal shouldn't have countered it because of a handball, as I've said previously, he missed the ball. That's a keeper error. And then against Arsenal, while it could have been a draw by Indir, he's scared of claiming and being aggressive in the air. I mean, he's completely terrified of aerial balls. So I don't know. So hopefully, if they would have solved this keeper earlier with Lemons, maybe they would still be in the League Cup. Maybe they would have gotten a point against Arsenal. So hopefully he's the solution. We'll see. We'll move on to Newcastle. I think their 2 biggest issues for me is probably their attacking depth on the wings and their fullback issues as well. On the wings, I mean, they have Elanga and Gordon, who I think as first choice are actually really good options. But behind them, Jacob Murphy, who admittedly had a good season last season. I think he might have even reached double-digit assists. But, was that a one season sort of thing? I think he's like 30 years old. So I think physically he's still there. I just don't know if quality wise he can consistently be an option for them, especially with Champions League football. And then Harvey Barnes, while on paper, when you watch him, he looks like he's a decent player. I just think mentality wise and decision making wise, he's not where he needs to be in terms of his passing. Like, I think he's just like a tunnel vision type of player. He's like one of those, like, if you ever, any of you ever play basketball and that one guy gets the ball and the only way you're going to see that ball is if he gets it off the rim after you shoot it. Like, that's the type of player Harvey Barnes is on the wing for them. So I just don't know. And then, you know, at fullback, they have 3 fullbacks, really. Lewis Hall and Tino Livramento as their first choice. And then Kieran Trippier, who can deputize on both sides. But he's also, I think, in his mid-30s now. Who knows if he's still at the level to consistently play with the top of the league. And then, you know, Dan Burn can probably cover on the left. I don't know if Malik Chow, I don't know how you pronounce it, who they brought over from Milan, can do that. But, you know, in any case, they have 3 natural fullbacks, when ideally you would want to have 2 for each position. So they're a little light there. And then at center back, I mean, we'll see if Botman can ever get healthy. But if he cannot, I mean, I think he went off hurt against Liverpool, if I'm not mistaken. I don't remember if that. I think I saw him go off hurt, either against Liverpool or a different match. I don't remember, but he's a good player, just can't stay healthy. And if he can't stay healthy, well, that leaves them with 3 reliable center backs: Dan Burn, Malik Chow, who we'll see if he's at the level for Newcastle, and Fabian Schär, who I think he even got a cut on his head and had to be brought off. So those are their weaknesses, in my opinion. And then moving on to the last team I'll speak about, Aston Villa. They brought in Jadon Sancho and Harvey Elliott, but they have no cover really for Ollie Watkins since losing John Duran to Saudi, and now Turkey he's moved on to. But they have no striker depth, in my opinion. They have a lot of attacking midfielders, which is, I guess, is cool. But if you have no striker depth, I mean, it's kind of pointless, in my opinion. And then in midfield, they have 2 big athletic defensive just midfielders in general, Boubacar Kamara and Onana. But the both of them are hurt at the moment, hamstring issues. And so as a result, Tielemans and John McGinn, had to play in midfield. And against Palace, as we saw, they were completely dominated in midfield. They just didn't have the legs to be in a 2-man midfield. And so if they can't get, you know, Onana and Boubacar Kamara back healthy, who knows how well they'll do this season. I mean, I don't think they've even scored a goal through 3 matches in the Premier League so far. So they look like they needed the juice with Harvey Elliott and Jadon Sancho. We'll see how good they can be for the team. Jadon Sancho was okay for Chelsea on loan last season. And Harvey Elliott, I mean, he was behind Mo Salah, so I'm not sure he was ever going to get the opportunity to showcase himself at Liverpool. Hopefully he can do that for Villa. But if they're going to be light in midfield and not have enough attacking output, I mean, Emi Buendia hasn't been at the level since he's been back from injury. And they let go of Jacob Ramsey. Morgan Rogers, while when you watch him isolated, he looks like a really good player. It just hasn't resulted in a lot of output. So we'll see. I think they're probably in line to, if they can recover, maybe finish in the Europa League, Conference League places. But I think their best hope at Champions League probably is to win the Europa League. And unless Harvey Elliott and Jadon Sancho change their lives, which, I mean, is a lot to say for Jadon Sancho at this point, but they have a lot of work to do. So, yeah, all of these teams, Big Six plus, they all have some health. I don't think I did want to mention Forest quickly. I didn't mention them. I forgot to actually write some notes on them, but, you know, they retained Morgan Gibbs-White. Their biggest hole for me is just high-end talent again. They lost Alanga and they brought in Ndoye from the Serie A, but, you know, I think they also brought in a fullback, I think, as well. Zinchenko? Did they bring in Zinchenko from Arsenal? I think so. But in any case, they just don't have the high end talent, I think, to repeat their success of last season, especially considering the fact that Nuno and, you know, their goon of an owner has been, you know, beefing, and it looks like Nuno doesn't even want to be there anymore. They got slapped at the weekend by somebody, I forget who. But yeah, they just don't look like they can replicate what the success that they had last season in terms of their talent. Like, they have a couple good players. Murillo, Hudson-Odoi has been okay before them. Morgan Gibbs-White, obviously very good. Elliot Anderson, he just made the England squad for the first time. But if they're not going to, they haven't really added enough, and it looks like Nuno is going. So I just don't think they'll be at the same level as last season. They'll probably finish mid-table if I had to guess, considering their transfer deadline and transfer window in general. But yeah, those are my thoughts and my commentary on the transfer window, deadline day and weekend, as well as some of the top 6 plus a couple other teams that finished in those places last season. If you've come across this video, just leave a like. It was a bit of a longer one. I didn't expect it to be 40 plus minutes, but I'll see y'all for the next one. Peace.